This podcast contains explicit language. If you want to know how explicit, keep listening. Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of June 26th, 2023. On this week's show, The Ringer's Ben Lindbergh will talk about the Marlins' Luis Arraez and his quest for the first 400 season since 1941. The Athletic's Steph will also join us to discuss the U.S. women's national team's roster for the World Cup and whether injuries could cost them a title. Finally, golfers Maycee Aycock and Sarah Marshall will come on to share how they've redefined what it means to be a college athlete. And all it took was shooting some of the worst rounds of golf of all time. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm the author of The Queen and the host of the podcast 1 Year. Also in Washington, D.C. is Stefan Fatsis. He's the author of Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. Hello, Stefan.
Hey, Josh. How's it going?
Going swimmingly. And as a golfer yourself, look forward to your insight and expertise.
I'm going to say former golfer. It's been a while.
Not to belabor a point we've made the past few weeks. Actually, to belabor a point. But Stefan and I both hope you got the chance to listen to all 4 episodes of Joel Anderson's Slow Burn, Season 8, Becoming Justice Thomas. If you haven't, you can keep listening to us for now. We'll attempt to entertain you, but please promise that you will cue it up next. In our bonus segment for Slate Plus members, Ben Lindbergh will stick around, and we'll talk to him about the Cincinnati Reds and the New York Mets. One of them has surprised in a good way, one in a not so good way. Check out your newspaper baseball standings to see which is which. To hear that segment, you need to be a Slate Plus member. You get bonus segments on this and other Slate shows, including Slow Burn. You get to listen ad-free. You get unlimited reading on the Slate site, and you get to support us. Slate.com/hangupplus. Slate.com/hangupplus. On Sunday, Luis Arraez went 1 for 4 at the plate, dropping his batting average to .399 on the year and ruining this entire segment. And yet, we persist because as recently as Saturday, the Miami Marlins second baseman was hitting .401. No major leaguer has reached the 400 plateau in a full season since Ted Williams hit .406 in 1941. And only a handful of guys have maintained a 400 average this deep into a season in the last 80 plus years. Joining us now is one of them, Ben Lindbergh. You can read him at The Ringer, listen to him on the podcast Effectively Wild, and buy his books, The MVP Machine, and The Only Rule Is It Has to Work. Ben, welcome.
Hey guys, good to be here. And despite my sabermetric leanings, I'm excited to talk to you about batting average.
Let's start by talking about who Luis Arraez is. The basics are that he's 26, born in Venezuela. This is his first year in Miami after 4 in Minnesota. So Ben, what kind of hitter is he? And going into this year, if you were going to pick a guy in the majors to have a chance to hit 400, would he have been your guy?
Yes, although it would have been a very low chance. He won the batting title last year, which doesn't seem to mean as much these days. I don't know how many people were aware that he won the batting title because he batted .316 last year, which is not nearly as exciting as .399. But he's been that guy all along, really. He was that guy in the minors, his first professional season, his age 17 season. He was hitting in the high 300s. He's one of these guys who they say he could fall out of bed and hit 300, right? He's always been that. And he wasn't a top prospect. You know, he signed for a $40,000 bonus. He was not someone who was making top 100 prospect lists. And that's because he doesn't have a big build. He's not a big guy. He's not a speedy guy. He's not particularly toolsy. Doesn't hit for a lot of home runs. Doesn't steal a lot of bases. And there were questions about how this would translate to the majors. But basically, day one, you know, when he was a rookie for the Twins in 2019, he batted .334 in 92 games. So not unexpected that he would be the one challenging for this if anyone were to, but very unexpected that even he could.
I mean, this is throwback baseball. I mean, this is baseball when I was a kid, when it was exciting to see Rod Carew or Tony Gwynn or George Brett be in the above 350 mark. I loved that. I checked the batting average was something we obviously checked assiduously every day in the box scores.
But Stefan, it was also baseball when I was a kid. John Olerud,
Sure.
Andres Galarraga, Larry Walker. There was that kind of period in the early to mid 90s where some guys were making a run at it too.
And it is cyclical, though. I mean, if you go back to the 60s, of course, Ben, what did Carl Yastrzemski lead the league at? 301?
301, yeah.
Yeah. So with someone like Arraez, is it really just sort of an anomaly that he has happened to be successful doing this old schooly thing? He doesn't strike out much. He gets on base, obviously, a lot, which is good. But he is not the kind of a hitter, I imagine, that scouts at any level of the minor leagues would have said, oh, we absolutely need to keep promoting this guy because he has all the tools that we want.
Right. I think that's one of the reasons he didn't show up high on prospect lists, is that he didn't really fit the mold. He breaks the modern mold for a major league player, which is great. It's nice to have mold breaking players. There's kind of a concern about the lack of biodiversity in baseball, and everyone's trying to hit the same way, and there's an optimized style of hitting. And he does go against that, though obviously it works well for him. All the conditions are not conducive to doing what he's doing now. We didn't really think there would ever be a 400 hitter again. I wasn't sure there'd ever be someone who made a run at being a 400 hitter again for so many reasons, right? You can go back to the famous Stephen Jay Gould essay from the 80s where he talked about how the higher the talent level gets in the league, the more talent is compressed and the harder it is for the outliers to be way better than the players who aren't as good as they are. So no one's hit 400 in the integrated majors, right? You have to go back to 1941 and Ted Williams, who was not facing black players in the American League at the time. So that's part of it. But it's also that we're at a low ebb for batting average. The league batting average this year, majors wide, is 248. So outside of the 19th century and the dead ball era and that pre-DH 60s, early 70s time that you just mentioned, Stefan, this is the hardest era in which to hit for average because pitchers throw incredibly hard. Batters are less averse to the strikeout, right? Everyone has pitch design, sliders, and breaking balls. It's just incredibly difficult to make contact at all now. And pitching usage has changed. So you're not even seeing the same pitchers in the game 3 or 4 times the way that you used to. There's just a constant fresh arm cycling in. It's incredibly difficult to do what he's doing, and he's doing it in a unique way. I think unique is sometimes overused, but I think it actually applies to Luis Arraez.
The next highest batting average in the major leagues is Ronald Acuna, the Braves, 328,
Right.
71 points slower. And the thing that shocked me the most when I was doing prep for this, Ben, is I will not say it immediately, so maybe listeners can guess. Like, how many players do you think are hitting even above 300 in the major leagues right now? I mean, it's a remarkably low number. The answer is 8. Mm-hmm. There are 8 players in all of the major leagues hitting 300 or above. I mean, I don't know off the top of your head, Ben, if you know, but like that seems like it must be one of the lowest numbers ever.
Probably, yeah. It's not quite Yastrzemski just barely clearing 300 when he won a batting title, but it's not far from that. And
I mean, it reminds me of like Pedro Martinez's ERAs during the peak live ball kind of era, of modern baseball.
There's a stat that can capture that called average plus. There's a plus stat for everything these days. So at Fangraphs, there's a stat called average plus, which is basically just your batting average relative to the league. So he's at 159. Ted Williams in 1941 was at 147 because the batting average in his league was far higher than the average in Arraez's league this year. So even though his batting average is lower than Ted Williams's was at the end of that season, it's more impressive relative to his peers. He could finish considerably below 400 and still have the best season of all time by average plus, just because he's doing it in this era that really goes against 400 hitters. And you wouldn't think that he would necessarily be the one to do this because some of the things he does or doesn't do make it harder for him to do this. He walks a fair amount, but not a lot, right? If you walk a ton like Ted Williams did, then you get a lot of plate appearances that get you closer to qualifying for the batting title without giving you the chance of messing up your batting average. Another thing he doesn't do that Ted Williams did often was hit home runs, right? He barely hits any home runs, and home runs, that's a guaranteed hit if you can hit the ball over the wall. And he's not fast. He's among the slower major leaguers out there. So he is not beating out a lot of infield hits. What he does do is make contact at an extraordinary rate in this era, mid-single digit strikeout percentage, again, in an era when well over 20% is the average. So he's not giving up outs that way. And if you look at just how hard he hits the ball, you'd think, how is he doing this? Because he's sort of a slap hitter. He doesn't hit the ball that hard, but he also doesn't mishit the ball very often. And so he hits it very consistently at his somewhat soft exit speed. And he hits it in such a way that he just kind of smacks it, lines it, loops it over the infield, and it just drops in the outfield. And even though outfielders play shallow against him, they can't play shallow enough. And he sprays the ball all over the field. So you might think left-handed hitter, maybe he's benefiting from the new rules that have suppressed shifting. Not really. He was rarely shifted before and didn't lose many hits to the shift because he's just so hard to defend. So he just kind of consistently hits the ball, not very hard, but with perfect placement, which, again, is very much a throwback to a century ago.
Arraez should be a hero to every undersized Little League and high school and college baseball player. He does exactly what I was taught to do when I was a kid as an undersized Little League baseball player, which is hit the ball where people aren't standing. But the striking thing then is that he doesn't seem to have a weakness. No pitch seems to stump him. Our colleague Alex Kirshner wrote a piece for Slate about Arraez, in which he noted that he's hitting .398 against four-seam fastballs, .333 against sinkers, .438 against sliders, .450 against changeups, .455 against curveballs, .360 against cutters, and .333 against splitters. A, what's a pitcher supposed to do? And B, what physical attributes do you think allow Arraez to do what he's doing? What makes him so good at making contact with the ball and sending it to places where no one is standing?
Yeah, as to the second question, I think it's just preternatural bat-to-ball ability and hand-eye coordination, coupled with an awareness of who he is as a hitter. I think that he's not feeling any pressure to conform to the more power and patience and whiff-oriented offensive game that's in vogue these days, for good reasons for a lot of players. I'm not saying everyone should or could be Luis Arraez or should emulate him. I don't think a lot of people have the abilities that he has, but he has recognized what his strengths are and aren't, right? So if he were to swing for the fences and were to try to get his launch angle up, I mean, he might pop a few more balls over the fence, but at what cost, right? Clearly, when you're batting 400, it's fine if you don't have that many home runs. He is batting 400 almost and slugging less than 500, which is also kind of hard to do. And that speaks to the lack of power. But again, if you can do what he does, then you should keep doing that. It's just that no one else can do what he does. And I don't think there is an obvious answer or weakness or hole that exists that should be exploited. The thing is, though, that things are going his way, right? When you're a batter like him who puts the ball in play constantly, then you are sort of subject to the vagaries of luck and batting average on balls in play and balls finding holes instead of finding gloves. So if you go back a century or more to Rogers Hornsby or Ty Cobb, guys like that may have been true talent 400 hitters. That was their actual skill level at the time. They would do it for multiple seasons in a row. Nowadays, there's no such thing as a 400 true talent hitter, even Luis Arraez. So you have to be a high 300s hitter who then gets a little lucky, right? So I make the Wile E. Coyote comp with him, right? Because it's just kind of like, running into thin air and trying not to look down and remember that gravity is constantly pulling you down to a lower batting average, which just hasn't happened yet.
5 for 5 in 3 separate games in June. It's really incredible. And I want to circle back to what you said at the very top, Ben, about how you're sabermetrically inclined, but looking forward to celebrating batting average in this segment. What is it about the quest for 400 that has retained the sort of myth and magic to it beyond just the fact that nobody has done it in a while. And, even in an age when batting average is sort of sniffed at, not just by, people who, read Fangraphs and baseball prospectus. It's like, I think, minimized even on mainstream broadcasts now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That said, when you're batting .399, no one's saying, actually, he's not that good, right? Because if you bat .399, you're probably pretty productive, even if you're not doing a whole lot else offensively. I think it's partly a throwback and partly just the novelty of it and just how much of an outlier he is. As you said, no one within 70 points of batting average. Anytime anyone is doing something like that no one else is doing, that everything would tell us is unsustainable, how can you not root for it to be sustained, right? And
I guess the other thing is that an average or a percentage, as opposed to being on pace to set the home run record. When you're on pace to set the home run record at this point in the season, you would have somewhere in the 30s, right? Mm-hmm. And now, he's literally hitting 400, and it's just he's at the place that he needs to be. And I think it's compelling to see someone, like you said, fight against gravity. He's there, and we can watch and see him be there or try to be there for the next, 3 months.
Right. And if you run the numbers, if you do the projections, then he has something like a 3% chance to pull this off. Dan Szymborski wrote about that for Fangraphs last week. And that's actually high if you know how impossible it is to try to do what he's doing. But I think, even though the projections would tell you he'll probably end up at a mere 360 or so, that's the most likely outcome. How can you not root for him to beat the odds, right? And yeah, he has the highest batting average through a team's first 79 games since the 90s, really, since, Walker and Olerud, no one's really sustained it thus far. It's true that if you look at any span of this long, he's had 73 games where he's done this, right? If you look for any 73 game span within a season where someone has batted .399, you can find some that are not ancient history. Jose Altuve, for instance, to name another diminutive player, right? For the sign-stealing Astros in 2017, although he was reportedly not one of the prominent practitioners of that. But for instance, from late May through late August of that year, he batted .400 over an equivalent period that Arraez has done here. The difference is Arraez has done it to start the season, and so that's his average. It's .399, whereas Altuve, he was batting .291 well into that year before his 400 streak started, and then at the end he was batting, I think, .356. It was impressive, but no one was saying, is he going to hit 400? And, he did that for a span in 2016, as did Joey Votto. But the fact that Arraez has timed it so that it's from the start of the season makes it super exciting to track. And, he's kind of a fun guy too, right? He's calling his shots. He hit a home run the other night and supposedly predicted it. Players are constantly predicting these things, but I'm into it though. I think if he were to keep this up all season, which would be near miraculous, then you probably would have an interesting debate about awards, right? Because he is currently 27th in wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs, despite batting .399. He's 14th in the National League. Ronald Acuna, who you mentioned earlier, who's a distant second in batting average, he is a distant first relative to Arraez in overall value. So then I guess you might still have some old school versus new school. Are we going to give him narrative points and call him the MVP, or are we going to be party poopers and just go with WAR over the guy who hit 400? But I think also at this point, the whole old school scouts versus stats and denigrating batting average and other people overrating batting average, that's pretty passé at this point. I think most people have moved on. And so since the emotions surrounding that whole discourse have subsided, I think we can now just enjoy the guy who has a freaky batting average.
And Stefan, famously, Ted Williams didn't win the MVP in 1941. Right. Joe DiMaggio won with the 56-game hitting streak. And that was kind of the ultimate test of what is the coolest thing you can possibly do in baseball.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone can conjure a 56-game hitting streak this season, but I guess if it's the season of someone trying to hit 400, you never know.
He's also got a great nickname, Regadera, the watering can. Right. That alone should get him a few votes for MVP if he hits 400.
Right. The sprinkler, I guess, is another translation, right? Because he sprays the ball over the field. It fits.
Ben Lindbergh writes for The Ringer. You can listen to him on the Fangraphs podcast, Effectively Wild. And the books, again, are The MVP Machine and The Only Rule Is It Has to Work. Ben, thank you as always.
My pleasure.
Up next, The Athletic's Steph Young on what you need to know about the U.S. women's national team's World Cup roster.
The United States roster for the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, which starts on July 20th, was revealed last week in an 8-minute video led off by the President and First Lady. Celebrities then announced each of the 23 players. Taylor Swift started with Alex Morgan, Megan Thee Stallion handled Megan Rapinoe, Shaquille O'Neal welcomed Trinity Rodman, whose father Dennis Shaq last year called the worst teammate he ever had. Lil Wayne wrapped things up.
Now, this next player brings intensity, leadership, swagger. Crystal Dunn, welcome to your second Women's World Cup team. Bring home another trophy. Go USA!
Bad Bunny was unavailable, so I am here to announce that our next guest is Steph Young, who covers women's soccer for The Athletic. Welcome back to the show, Steph.
Hi, guys.
This roster features 14 players making their World Cup debuts, up from 11 newbies in 2019 and 8 in 2015. One reason for the bump is injuries. Key players missing from that video included defender and captain Becky Sauerbrunn, who's got an undisclosed foot injury, forward Mallory Swanson, who tore a knee tendon, and midfielder Katerina Macario, who's still recovering from a torn ACL. Steph, how big a problem are these absences as the defending champs go for their 5th World Cup title?
Macario was rough because I fully believe she's the future of this squad, but it happened long enough ago that they were able to kind of plan around it and start building out midfield plans. The Swanson one was even rougher just because it's closer to the tournament and they were relying heavily on her to be a big goal-scoring presence for them. But again, maybe it gives them a little wiggle time, and obviously they've got Alyssa Thompson now in there, who's another superstar who I really believe is the future of this team. But then you get hit with Becky Sauerbrunn, and it's like, okay, something like, was there a curse? Was there a wizard who was really angry at, like, what's going on here? Where she does have a foot injury, but beyond that, she's such a huge leader. She recently did a podcast called Snacks with teammates Lynn Williams and Sam Mewis, where they were both going on about how her leadership is irreplaceable and valuable. And they've both literally called her like the moral center of the team. So beyond just like tactically, what do we do? But people look to her like emotionally and morally. They've said like, if I have a question in my life, I think, well, what would Becky do about this? And then I kind of like go from there. So to lose someone who is like that important to the morale of the locker room, the team has other leaders. I don't want to shortchange the veterans who have been on this team and the important locker room leadership they provide, like Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan in there. But to lose someone like Becky Sauerbrunn so close to the World Cup, coming down to the wire, a decision about, is her foot going to be good enough? Is there enough, is there too much variability in her availability to us? I don't know if you can really, quantify it.
England has also just been hit with an enormous number of injuries. Also, Vivian Miedema from the Netherlands, among many, many other players, won't be there due to injury. And so if we're just kind of talking about strict competitive advantage or disadvantage, it seems hard to actually weigh because so many teams are struggling through the same thing. Does that seem right?
Yes, I actually think that in a really dark way, maybe there's a level playing field and that everybody really got hit with an injury bug to a certain extent. There's maybe another podcast in there for you guys about ACLs and injuries with women and research on women's bodies and how they interact with soccer and surfaces and equipment. But yeah, I think everybody is hurting in some way or another. I think what that really highlights actually for people to pay attention to is the development pipeline for each of these countries. Who was able to call up amazing players or even competent players to kind of fill in these big talent gaps for the United States. Yes, we got hurt, but again, I go back to having players like Trinity Rodman, Alyssa Thompson on the roster, Naomi Girma, who's a first-timer. And I think that does speak well to at least the United States' ability to scout and develop talent.
You mentioned Alyssa Thompson a couple times, 18 years old. She has only 3 caps. She's got this tremendous speed and goal scoring ability. Another surprise call up, maybe she wasn't a surprise, but maybe the biggest surprise call up for this team was Savannah DeMello, a player who had 0 caps, 0 appearances on the international level. Why do you think that head coach Vlatko Andonovski opted for DeMello over other more veteran players that may be helpful given this injury situation, which extends, to players that are on the roster too? Rose Lavelle, big star, has been hurt. Some defenders have been hurt. This is not a smooth roster, even when you eliminate the absolutely injured players that can't be there. So DeMello, no caps, gets the call up.
Yeah, so this is a little bit inside baseball, which people wouldn't necessarily know, but what is known is Vlatko Andonovski obviously watched the National Women's Soccer League very closely because players spend 95% of their time at their clubs. That's the only way you're going to get the data you need to really make an informed decision. You get players in camp 3-5 times a year for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. Can't base it on that. So DeMello is someone he's watched pretty closely. He was actually at a game where Racing Louisville was playing away. I think this was in Chicago. And, I was talking to some friends of mine. They're like, oh, Vlatko Andonovski's here. He's here in the press box. He's watching DeMello. He's like chatting to us about her. She's someone who's clearly been on the top of his mind, at the very least in terms of his depth. And I think if you look at the midfield, the way the team has played their midfield for the past honestly year plus, the players that he's rotated in there, I'm thinking of, someone like Taylor Cornett comes to mind who's really shifted around. You can tell that the midfield is an area where they were still pretty much tinkering up until the last second, trying to figure out what goes on here. I think that goes all the way back to Katerina Macario being injured. She's kind of a 10 style playmaker central area who, once she was injured, they were like, oh God, there's so much you have to shift around to compensate for this. And they've been trying to compensate. And I think it came down to probably him and his staff were like, guys, the things we've done have kind of worked, but they kind of haven't. Savannah's someone who we have a decent amount of data on. She's played with another player who's been in the system, Jalen Howell. They have a good partnership going at Racing Louisville. Jalen's also someone who's on the radar for maybe the next 4 years. Let's take a risk.
And I should point out here that Steph profiled Savannah DeMello, and we will link to that piece on our homepage.
So the World Cup is where both on-field stars and kind of cultural icons get made for the U.S. women's national team. And we have players that fit in both categories. Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan are on this squad. They'll be in different roles. I think Alex Morgan, maybe more than people expected because of these injuries, is going to be relied on not to be a veteran presence, but to be scoring a whole crap ton of goals. Megan Rapinoe, referred to as kind of the grandma of the team, and will be in a sort of super sub role, providing maybe more leadership than kind of on-field stuff. But then you also have, familiar players, Rose Lavelle, Lindsey Horan, Julie Ertz is back after a really long absence. But who do you think, I guess, are the most important players on the team? Maybe Naomi Girma is one that comes to mind for me, but who for you is somebody who people will know or will need to know or should know kind of after the World Cup begins?
I'll give you one in each kind of on-field position, not in goal. So defenders, you mentioned Naomi Girma. This is the time. Girma has looked so confident already. She had a rookie season with her club last season, but for the national team, she stepped in and it looked effortless, smooth. It probably didn't feel effortless and smooth. We can't know the amount of work that went to it, but she already looks like the kind of international player this team is going to rely on for the next 8-12 years, at least, knock on wood. In the midfield, I think people should be looking at maybe Ashley Sanchez to see if she can step up. This is a player who I think could pop off, but there's the most variability with this one. She's someone who has a great partnership with Trinity Rodman, who's her teammate at the Washington Spirit, but has kind of varied in that partnership between club and country. She's a very creative, attack-minded player who can like kind of unzip a defense for you. But again, that consistency piece at the highest level has not always totally landed. So, we'll see where she goes with that. And then in the forwards, this is Sophia Smith's tournament. This has got to be, if you've seen her playing for both club and country lately, I don't want to say any player's unstoppable, but to the extent that a human player can be unstoppable, she is. She's so young too. She's
just scored a hat trick on Sunday.
Yeah, I don't want to say a baby, but she is a baby. Someone asked her a question recently on a presser about the influence of the 99ers. And she was like, I wasn't quite alive in 1999. And I shriveled up, into a little corncob husk. Yeah, she's 22 years old. So if you watch Sophia Smith, she's ready. The timer has dinged. She's ready to come out of the oven. She's ready to stun audiences. If you watch one player from this team, watch Sophia Smith.
And I want to stick up front there for a minute because, Josh, you mentioned Alex Morgan's increased role, and Steph, you just mentioned Sophia Smith. Morgan really is the only striker on this team, natural striker. What does that mean as we're watching sort of getting into the 60th, 70th minute? If Sophia Smith is playing on one of the wings and we're counting on her to do some scoring in addition to partnering with Morgan and maybe Trinity Rodman or Lynn Williams up top, what happens later in the game? Are we just going to sort of expect that, Alex gets subbed off because she's in her 30s. Sophia Smith maybe shifts to the middle. What happens if the U.S. is in sort of a desperate position as these games wear on and you need to do something up top?
Vlatko actually addressed this. He was talking about his roster, and he has confidence that a lot of the players in this forward pool, not just Alex Morgan, can kind of play in more of a 9 role, a pure striker role. So he's looking to Trinity Rodman, even Sophia Smith, Alyssa Thompson, Lynn Williams. Yes, these are all players who kind of can play more traditionally wide, but Smith has played a 9 for the Portland Thorns. She's really good at it. Trinity Rodman is someone who can come inside. Lynn Williams is also someone who can come inside. So it doesn't seem like he's too worried about in front of the goal. Honestly, looking at these players and the form that they've been in, Lynn Williams just at the time of recording, scored an amazing half volley goal for Gotham FC last night. She's in great form. Trinity Rodman basically looks like she looks like one of those really big, powerful trucks that's made to haul big trailers full of horses and stuff. She looks that powerful, ready to go out of the gate. And that's also her mental attitude as well. We mentioned Sophia Smith. Alyssa Thompson, 18, still turning in English class essays, and yet is still popping off for Angel City. The forwards are probably where I kind of have my least area of worry.
I'm enjoying getting this kind of tour of the roster. It's useful for me, and I hope for listeners kind of as we're ramping up for the World Cup. So kind of another question for you, Steph, is who is the player, maybe somebody we haven't mentioned yet, who you were kind of most happy to see actually make the roster, where it was like, oh, it's really great that maybe it was their first time or for whatever reason. And then who is the player, again, maybe someone we haven't mentioned, who you were kind of most sad for that they didn't make the roster in 2023?
Well, we'll start with sad because it's nice to go from sad to happy. I was pretty sad to see that Adie Franch, the goalkeeper, was not on this roster. She's someone who has been in the pool in the past. Looked for a hot second like she might be getting trained to kind of step into that number 2 role behind Alyssa Nair. And then for whatever reason, maybe some performance on the field. We're not privy to 100% of what goes on in training. She hasn't had the best season with her club this season so far. I'm not going to say it's the worst, and she's certainly still a great goalkeeper, but maybe not the best compared especially to some of the other names on the roster, like Aubrey Kingsbury. Yeah, you can see maybe she slips down the order there, and then, World Cup roster time, it's ruthless. You want to take all your favorites. You want to bring Becky Sauerbrunn along just for the vibes, but it's a 23 player roster. Another one where it's FIFA wouldn't let them expand to 26 like the men. Another episode. But, really sad for Franch. Big fan of her. I think she's, on top of being a great goalkeeper, a great person. You always want to see great people do well in life. The person I'm happiest for making this roster, Kristie Mewis. I'm a longtime Boston resident, Boston Breakers fan. Kristie Mewis, obviously Boston local. She would describe herself as a masshole, pardon my French. She was a bubble player, and they put out video of the players getting their acceptance calls. You can see Kristie Mewis instantly start crying. I think she was really aware of herself as a bubble player. She called herself a bubble player on another podcast. So, seeing her make it, like play her way back onto a team where she'd previously been on the outs for years, that's a nice story.
And her partner, Sam Kerr, is Australian and is like one of the stars of the home tournaments. That must be nice for them to be able to, share that together.
I think it'll be nice after the tournament. Sam Kerr outright posted on Instagram, like, congrats on making the roster. This is the last time I'm going to cheer for you.
4 years ago, Steph, I watched the U.S. play Spain at the World Cup and thought, well, we are in trouble in 4 years. Spain looks great. The Dutch far improved. England so solid and only getting better. The U.S. lost 3 times in a row last fall to England, Spain, and Germany. And yet I feel like we're going to this tournament where all of these other teams that we sort of counted on this progress are having real issues, whether it's pay equity issues in Canada or injuries that we mentioned earlier, or sort of turmoil inside federations, which has happened in Spain. Does the U.S. go into this tournament maybe a little bit more confident than they had a right to be in the last few years?
I don't know about have a right to be. I would say they probably have less going on in terms of internal politics than some of these other teams. You just mentioned Spain, obviously a team where 15 players sent a letter to the federation basically saying we need changes to happen. It's not just about the coach, Jorge Vilda. It's not just about the coach, but, they weren't asking that he get fired. They're asking for some fundamental changes in the federation with like how they treat the women in the women's program. And then, 3 of those players, I believe, were named to the roster, but 12 of them were still left off. So something is happening there, right? You have to imagine some kind of conversation happened. I'm not going to blame any player who is not making a ton of money relative to her male counterparts. And then for a Women's World Cup, which comes around once every 4 years, and they may never make another roster, I'm not going to blame a player for saying, okay, I cannot miss this kind of lifetime opportunity, in terms of, whatever happened between them and the other 12 players. But yeah, we've seen that. We've seen upheaval in France with Corinne Diacre out and then Hervé Renard in, bringing back in important players like Wendy Renard. All these teams having some kind of internal upheaval so close to the World Cup. Meanwhile, the United States feels a little more settled in these off-field areas, especially with, concluding the negotiation of their CBA alongside the men's national team with U.S. Soccer. So at least in that sense, maybe they have I don't want to say an edge, but it's one area where you don't have to worry, right? And it's kind of like, when you're moving and it's always in the back of your mind, you have to find a new apartment and you don't realize how much that background stress is just sucking like 30% of your energy out of you from the top. I think maybe in that respect, there is a benefit happening there for the U.S.
First group stage game for the U.S., 9 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. versus Vietnam. If everything goes as planned, there will be a news cycle there about whether they're celebrating too much after scoring various goals. And then the next 2 games, July 26th, 9 p.m. Eastern against the Netherlands, and then 3 a.m. Eastern against Portugal. I think U.S. is clear favorites to get out of the group. Steph, what do you think we should be looking for, given that I think things would have to be going pretty horribly wrong for the U.S. not to get out of the group?
Well,
what should we be looking for in the group to see if, things are gelling and going well?
I think people shouldn't underestimate the first opening game against Vietnam. I do think they should expect them to win with respect to Vietnam. They're a program that has not been given as many resources as their federation, and they're coming from a country that, doesn't have the same cultural attitude or level of support or even size of population to support, youth soccer development pipeline. I think they are an improving team in their confederation in Asia, but I think what people should be looking there is that's a great game for the United States to set tone and to get everybody, its starters, warmed up. I think people should look at that starting 11, see what the tempo is, see if the players look tight or, if they relax into the game. And that'll set the tone for the next game, USA-Netherlands, which is obviously a rematch of the final from 2019.
I will point out, Germany 2, Vietnam 1 this Saturday. This is a well-organized team from what I've read. Probably not with the talent, but I don't think we're looking at a 13-0 first game for the U.S. the way they opened the tournament 4 years ago against Thailand. Steph Young covers women's soccer for The Athletic. We will look forward to talking to you as we get closer and during the tournament, Steph.
Thanks, guys.
Maycee Aycock and Sarah Marshall from the Meredith College women's golf team, who were so bad that they are beloved. When the women's golf team at Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina needed players this spring, Maycee Aycock and Sarah Marshall answered the call. Well, actually, they answered an email. After the team's roster dropped to just 2 players because of injuries and defections, head coach Jimmy Hamilton sent an e-blast to the student body with the subject line, "Calling all golfers." Maycee K and Sarah had never played a full round of golf. They didn't have equipment. They weren't sure what to wear on the course, but they decided to give it a shot. Well, to be accurate, in their first round as collegiate golfers, Maycee K gave it 158 shots and Sarah gave it 276 shots. But they finished the season not as goats, but heroes, preserving their school's varsity status and allowing their conference to send a team to the NCAA Division III championships. Our friend Shane Ryan told the story in a fantastic piece for Golf Digest that everybody should read, and we are delighted to welcome Maycee K and Sarah to the show. Hey, guys.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on. Shane's story celebrated your perseverance, your good humor, and your selflessness. But Sarah, that first round could not have been easy. I mean, 276. Describe what you thought you were getting into when you said, "Sure, I'll join the golf team," and what happened that day.
I was definitely not expecting to shoot a 276, that's for sure. I just wanted to do something fun. I wanted to be a collegiate athlete. I thought this was like a perfect opportunity to do something cool. So I answered the email. I did not think I was that bad at golf. I had been to a driving range, played maybe like some par 3 courses, and I went out there thinking that I'd give it my best shot and maybe I could be good. But golf definitely isn't an easy sport to pick up, and that round definitely defeated me. But it was fun. The season was fun, and we had a great time.
Maycee K, the quote in the story that made me laugh the most, and that I think also made you guys laugh, was, I think it was Sarah saying, back in the hotel room that night, I told her, "Look, now we're trauma bonded." Can you tell me about that conversation you guys had in the hotel room after the round, or just kind of how you guys, were there for each other that day?
Sarah and I had definitely played a very intense day of golf. That first round, I want to say that was the day we met on the golf cart when we both got done. And we were like, "How did you do to the other one?" And both of us were just like, "That was so bad. It was brutal. Like, we're just glad we've made it through. Like, how are we going to do this again tomorrow?" And we had dinner, and our coach actually looked at Sarah and was like, "So, Sarah, how do you plan to improve before tomorrow?" So we were just really, giggly at this point. We make it back to our hotel room, and we were supposed to be watching golf on TV. Our coach had instructed us to watch some swings, and we ended up watching the basketball game. I want to say Chapel Hill was playing that night, and we were just standing up, practicing swings in this really bad hotel room. I think our first tournament, we were in a room that smelled like straight smoke. I had to wash my entire duffel bag along with all my clothes inside of it. And we didn't have air condition, I want to say, in that room. Like, our air condition was broke. So we were just like, despite everything, we're just connected through all of this experience now.
It's really glamorous being a D3 athlete.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah, I love something you said, too, in the story about that first day that I don't know why, but I didn't really put two and two together that these are college athletes that have been playing their whole lives. Because you said that your opponent or your playing partner from another school was not super understanding that day.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that like not every other school just got an email and was like, the team's falling apart, we need people. So I was just kind of in my own world up until the tournament, trying to like get everything done so I could join the team and go out there and play golf. And to me, like, it was just all for fun. Like, I'm just there to have a good time. And then I get there and the tournament's a little bit more legit than I was expecting. There's like schools from all over, like people are taking this really serious. And I'm like, oh wow, like what the heck did I just get into? And then I guess, yeah, playing with a real collegiate athlete for the first time and then it being your first time ever playing golf is definitely, but yeah, she wasn't terrible. Like, she wasn't mean to me. She was kind of more understanding at the beginning, but then like as the day like dragged on, obviously, it's kind of rough to play with somebody who's shooting a 276.
So I have not played a full round of golf either. And I've had the experience a bunch of times of swinging a club like at the driving range or whatever and just missing the ball completely, or doing the thing where you're on the driving range, if you're on the double-decker one, and you hit it and it just rolls off and just falls off of the range. That's always kind of humiliating. I guess I want to hear a little bit more, Maycee K, about just like what's an individual shot that you hit that like kind of evokes your like newness in the game. Like what is the worst individual shot out of all of the ones that you've shot that maybe we can, as non-golfers, we can all relate to?
Okay, so I'll set the scene on this one. I don't think people understand that with college golf, like when you tee off at the first box, there's a group of people standing there and they announce you, they say your school, and people clap, and there's like a bunch of people there. And at the conference championship
from Meredith College, Maycee K. Aycock.
That's exactly what they say. And I was like actually like hitting like the best balls of my life on the driving range that morning. Like Sarah was like, how are you doing this? Even my coach was like, this is really good. And this is the last day. But that first hole, anytime I teed off on that one, it was just like I couldn't hit it. Like it would roll off the tee box like you were talking about, but it would roll to the side. Or I would miss it the first time. Like none of us could figure out why I couldn't hit it on the first one. But on that first hole at that tournament, I would hit like a 14 like every day. And then my score would just go down the rest of the day. But that was my worst hole. But just imagine your coach being so proud of you and then being like, well, it can only go up from here after you hit your first ball that day. So,
unlike Josh, I have played a bunch of golf in high school and in my 20s. I will confess here, maybe for the first time on the show, that I was suspended from my high school golf team for throwing a club on a green. The guy I was playing against, Ardsley High School, I have not forgotten you, dude. He ratted me out. And I got suspended for
what's the worst
match.
round you ever shot, Stefan, that you can remember?
Oh, I mean, I think my first round was a 123, as I recall, when I was 14 or 15 years old. I shot a 105 at St. Andrews in Scotland. Not a great score. Very difficult course, though. Very windy that day. But Josh is sort of picking on your worst shot here, guys. I want to hear what your best shots were this season. What was there that moment of, oh my God, I can do this and I want to keep playing?
For sure. I would say you definitely get some momentum from those good shots. And that's just like overall, like playing golf, you're going to have bad shots, you're going to have good shots. And I would say a great shot I had would have been, I chipped the ball from like outside of the green and everybody was like hyping it up. The other coach was, and I was like, it was really amazing because, like, when you're just so bad, the slightest thing you do that's just somewhat good or okay, everybody's going to go crazy for it. So I think that's what really kept me going, was the fact that there wasn't a lot of pressure on me. Everybody's just out there telling me, like, have fun, like, do your thing. It's okay. Like, my biggest goal in the golf course was to finish. Like, score didn't matter. Nothing mattered. So, like, when I would do something good, everybody was, like, really proud of me. And then even at the conference, like, tournament, I played with a girl and her dad was there watching her, and they, like, helped me understand golf and kind of understand what was going on throughout everything. And I hit a ball out of the sand onto the green, and they were like, oh my God, like, that looked like a professional player. And they went and told my coach, and they were like, yeah, she's killing it. I think I had like a 5 on a par 3, which was amazing for me. So that was really cool. And I would just say the people, even like when you're doing bad, they were like, it's okay, like, you got it, just keep practicing, you'll be amazed how much better you get. Really kept me going throughout the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the people that you play with have a lot to do it, because they're just so excited for you to be there, and they're impressed that you're, like, committed and even trying, as they've watched you hit like a 20 on some holes. So when you have that one good ball, they're just, like, overjoyed for you. So it, like, helps you want to keep, like, making it go well, like, keep playing.
So what was your best ball?
My best ball would have to be, we had this second hole at the last tournament. I hit it maybe like 115 with my 7 iron, got it over a second body of water on the hole. I had stayed out of the water on this hole. And another coach happened to be driving through. It's the last day, it was pouring rain. And he was like, that was such a good ball, and, like, stopped my coach and Sarah and was like, that was so good. So I think that, like, really helped me, because I hate being in wet clothes. So I was like, okay, if I can hit that, like, I can survive the rest of today.
The kind of lesson or moral of your story is almost, like, so obvious that I will not insult listeners by saying what it is. I mean, like, it is incredible that you guys have the amount of joy that you have, and that you're able to, laugh and smile and, like, actually see sports for what they should be. And I think it's so kind of remarkable and amazing. And, as Stefan kind of alluded to in the beginning, it's not just a story about you guys just, like, individually, like, improving and getting, it's like it's a story about selflessness, like your willingness to potentially be embarrassed or be bad at something because you're contributing to a greater cause, because you want your school to have a golf team. There needed to be a minimum number of players, and you guys were willing to kind of take those lumps. I guess, what do you think, Sarah, are the things that maybe you learned about golf, about sports, about yourself through this entire process?
I would say to, kind of that effect, I think me and Maycee K being out on the golf course was like a breath of fresh air. And I think that's why the story kind of gained a lot of traction. We really didn't know, like, how big what we were doing was, and we had no idea. But I could tell, like, throughout every single tournament we went to, like, people, like, were really amazed by us. And I was, we were kind of like, why? Like, what's going on? But if you look at it, and if you're around sports a lot, it's not every day that, you see somebody who's just, like, takes, like, losing or doing bad so well. And I think that's what we were good at. And we were just out there to, like, be nice to the other players, be nice to the staff. And, like, we were giving that, and people were giving it back to us. So I think that's kind of also what makes the story so interesting, is just that we're, like, comfortable with ourselves. We went out there, we're not crying. We're, people can look at us and kind of be inspired by that and kind of want to do better in their sports. And then I think also a lot of people came up to us and were like, you guys are my heroes. Like, that was really amazing. And again, we had no idea what we were doing until, like, honestly, the article came out in Golf Digest, and we were like, wow, we did something really cool. And I'm proud of us for that, for sure.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, I can honestly say I didn't like think the story was gonna become as big as it was. Like, I just was an intern for a company, and I was in Florida working for people, and somebody went through my Instagram and like saw where I had posted about like NBC, and they were like, wait, you work there? And I was like, no, like I was up there. And one of the girls that was also on the trip with me like is like, oh my God, you're one of the Meredith golfers. And she was like, my mom loves y'all. She thinks y'all are like so funny. And she was like, and she was saying y'all are the best type of people. But I will honestly say, when we wrote the article, like, I thought it was just meant to be funny. Like, I thought it was just like, we were funny. Like, we did this. It's kind of something abnormal. Like, you'll get some giggles out of me and Sarah. And then, like, I guess because I was, like, me and Sarah both grew up with sports backgrounds because of our family. So I guess because I just always thought, like, and both of us always thought, like, if you commit to something, you have to see it through. Like, there's not an option to give up. I think it's really weird growing up now and knowing that's not like the case for everyone. And I think that's why so many people like our stories, because like we have this background, like no matter how bad it gets, like you have to see it to the end, so you might as well make it enjoyable.
So are you going to keep playing golf? And are you going to keep playing golf for Meredith? What's the follow-up now?
100%. I think a lot of people want to see us succeed at this point. Even before all of this, we were planning on being on the team. The coach from day one we got out there, he was like, you will always have a spot on this team. Like, thank you so much for helping us out. So I know this summer I have been trying to go golf and play and get better. Actually, me, my dad, and my sister have a tee time at Lions Paul, which was the first golf course we ever played in the tournament. So that'll be fun. And then just like keep on having fun with it. At this point, I think I'm a little bit better, so golf is more enjoyable. And then I at least have another year on the golf team, and I'll be graduating. So we'll see what happens.
I will definitely still be on the team. I'm glad I'll have another year playing with Sarah. I don't really know when I'm graduating yet. That's to be determined. I haven't been able to practice as much as I'd like in all reality over the summer. I've had to work a lot, but yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes next year with all the new people coming on the team, because I think we have 3 or 4 joining us, so that'll be exciting.
You guys have to be like a recruiting tool at this point. Come play for Meredith College. You put the school on the map.
I would think so.
I think it's been good for Meredith College that we're out there.
Ray Ratto and Defector, I don't know if you guys saw this article saying, I demand these 2 awful, heroic golfers be given a hefty NIL deal. Do you believe that you deserve a hefty NIL deal? Have you received any? And or what is your kind of dream NIL deal?
So my friends were like very like are on Twitter and like all the things, and we're like seeing all these new articles being written about Sarah and I. And they sent this one to me, and we were recording an episode for our podcast one night, and I like tell Sarah about it, and she was like, no way. So at like 11:30 at night, we were like giggling, laying on the couch, reading this man's article, and she's like, I've got to get in contact with him to see how I can get an NIL deal. I think it would be cool if we got one. I would love to be an influencer one day in like my perfect world. So I wouldn't be upset if I got one. I'm in major debt from Meredith College, so that would be nice.
So yeah, actually, I had no clue about the article until Maycee said something, and I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this man is hyping this up. Like he is so right. Like I'm getting like amped up. I'm like, I need an NIL deal. So I actually sent him an email, and I was like, hey, read your article. Any advice? Because, you know, I'm kind of in this thing blind. I have no idea what's going on, but he did email me back, and he was like, yep, congratulations, love your story. And he was like, I'm no expert on NIL. I really can't help you. But he gave me like some people to contact. So I'm trying to work something out, get some type of deal. I've also been working for Body Armor sports games, so I've been just like around a ton of like sporting events and tournaments, and around like a lot of people, and everybody that kind of knows about my story is like NIL, but I'm like, I don't know how to get one. Like, can somebody help me?
I think we need to get Congress involved in this to get Maycee, Carey, and Sarah NIL deal. Stefan, should we end by having them promote their podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you want to be influencers and NIL sponsors,
give our listeners the sell here.
Okay, I'll pitch it. This is mine.
Yep.
So my name's Maycee K, and this is Sarah Marshall. And you just listened to us on Josh and Stefan's podcast. We have a podcast called Too Many Strokes. Sarah and I try to talk about golf, but our sense of humor gets to us sometimes. We get really off topic. We have 3 episodes currently out now, and we'll send y'all the link so you can put it in the show notes.
We will put the link to Too Many Strokes in our show notes for sure. Maycee K. Aycock, Sarah Marshall, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we had so much fun. Thank you guys a lot.
I don't know why I just thought your name was Andrew for some reason. Like, I said that and I was like, that's not right.
And now it is time for Afterballs, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says it was okay. Not that they need any emotional support at this point, clearly, but we should stress that Maycee K. Aycock and Sarah Marshall are not alone in racking up astronomical golf scores, Josh. There have been some very big ones in professional golf. In fact, Maycee K.'s best round of 131 this spring was within 4 strokes of what's believed to be the highest score in women's professional golf. That happened in 2019 at the Senior LPGA Championship, where Lee Ann Walker posted a fat 127. She didn't actually take 127 strokes, though. She shot an 85, but realized after the round that she was violating a new rule of which she was unaware, that players can no longer putt when their caddies have been standing behind them. So she added 42 penalty strokes to her round, giving her the 127. The likely highest round on the men's PGA Tour and the highest score from actual golf strokes came at the Tallahassee Open in 1974. A journeyman pro named Mike Reeser made the cut, but after the second round, he went horseback riding, as one does between rounds of a professional golf tournament, was thrown from the horse, separated his left shoulder, and cracked a few ribs. Reeser couldn't swing a club, but in those days, players needed to just finish the tournament to qualify to play the following week. Reeser couldn't afford to not play the next week. So he used a 5-iron, a wedge, and a putter to hack his way to a one-armed 123 on Saturday, followed by a round of 114 on Sunday. Josh, what's your Mike Reeser?
I'm going to start this one with a clip, Stefan. Let's just get right to it.
It's so cool to get more people involved. Like, most people don't really even know that we have a meat judging team. So it's awesome to get people involved and like kind of spread awareness that it's even a thing. So that's really cool.
So here I am spreading awareness, and good for me. First off, the chyron on the screen in that report from Texas's KBTX TV reads as follows: Kaylee Greiner, Texas A&M meat judging coach. And now we turn to a Texas A&M press release, which reads: Team members, all students in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences Department of Animal Science, placed first in beef grading, total beef, lamb judging, pork judging, specifications, and placings. The team placed second in reasons and beef judging to clinch the national title. That to me sounds like one of the great performances in meat judging history, though I would have liked to see a better performance in reasons. But as I did more research, I found more press releases. Washington State University meat judging team recently won their first national meat judging contest in over 50 years. Kansas State was crowned the national champion meat animal evaluation team. The University of Georgia Meat Dogs, that's DAWGS, also won a national championship in meat judging in 2022. And after a 2021 national championship, Texas Tech proclaimed itself the national powerhouse in meat judging. Now, Texas A&M does have a proclivity for awarding itself fake national championships. More than a decade ago, it started claiming the 1919 and 1927 football titles based on retroactive computer rankings. So You got to, do some digging, see if these claims stand up to scrutiny. In this case, I am thankfully here to affirm Texas A&M's claims and to say they actually undersold. An industry publication, the National Provisioner, notes that A&M won the international meat judging contest, which it calls the last contest of the year, the most important and, Stefan, the most sought after. And the piece continues. Although meat judging is competitive, intense, and rigorous, students can't help but express the sense of belonging it gives them. When asking peers from Texas Tech, they credit meat judging to giving them a family and skills they can use the rest of their lives. The culture on a meat judging team is different and hard to put into words. Students are thankful for the time they spend on a meat judging team, regardless of the early mornings, late nights, and contest results, and presumably the meat judging. You may be asking, what is meat judging? And while I was considering going through this entire Afterball without explaining it, I did find a video on YouTube from Meat Judging Dynasty Texas Tech. It's called What is Meat Judging? So here you go.
There are many misconceptions.
I have people ask us if we go butcher it ourselves, if we start using the knives and cutting it up.
But there's much more to meat judging than you might think.
It's almost like a sporting event.
Almost like a sporting event is close enough for me. Let's continue.
Students get together and we evaluate beef, pork, and lamb carcasses as well as cuts for different traits such as quality and cutability.
To assess quality, the judges look at marbling and the traits that impact taste.
They kind of shade the ribeye to make sure that they're not getting too much reflection of the light. This one's got quite a bit of marbling. It's probably about an average choice. So then they would bubble in their Scantron average choice.
I'd like to think that noise in the background, Josh, that sound, is some meat being cut. I can't prove it, but that's what I'm going to go with. My recollection from the video is that they recorded that in a meat locker, which it sounds like it. We should record our podcast in a meat locker. You also might have heard at the end that there are Scantrons. And honestly, I think that affirms that this is a sport. That's all you need to know. But if you demand more, Mike Paolucci of Sports Illustrated actually did a feature in 2019. It's titled Welcome to the World of Competitive Intercollegiate Meat Judging. And I did feel welcomed by this story. It begins, Taylor Schertz stayed on the move as she considered the 4 pig carcasses dangling in front of her, their hooves pierced by gleaming silver hooks, a clockwise sweep to the left to gauge their exposed innards, a dip back to the right for a better view of the flanks dotted by inspection stamps, a plunge forward to inspect each veined hide up close. A wall-mounted thermometer put the temperature at 36 degrees, cold enough for Schertz to layer a red parka atop a hoodie beneath her frock and to pull a gray mitten over her left hand, which she used to grip a clipboard the way a doctor carries a patient's chart. On it, she scribbled shorthand and bubbled in a Scantron that read, Intercollegiate Meat Judging Contest Quality Grading. So the Scantron is really important, confirmed. Now some more details, and all these are direct quotes from that Sports Illustrated piece. A school can enter as many competitors as it pleases. Texas Tech, one of 8 schools competing, sent 22 to Fort Worth, a full quarter of the field, but only 4 judges' scores count toward the official team total. Talent evaluation is difficult because a meat judger's competitive window is so small. Rules limit students to 1 season of eligibility at the college level. National championship winners are awarded belt buckles instead of rings. And the skill set of a champion meat judge is both eminently teachable and difficult to master. Quick decision-making, critical reasoning, self-assurance, and above all, the ability to quiet one's mind for upwards of 6 hours, standing in frigid temperatures and total silence. You don't want to spook the meat. That's not a quote from the story. Here is a quote from the story. You have to fight your own demons in the meat judging cooler. You might have thought that was a fake quote. That is a real quote from Aaron Bayer, who judged on Texas Tech's 2015 team and coached in 2017. And finally, from the Sports Illustrated story, and I quote, today, the Texas Tech Red Raiders are the Alabama football of the meat judging world. Under the guidance of their coach, Texas Tech has reset the standards of collegiate meat judging excellence.
Tech has captured 7 of the last 11 national championships, highlighted by a 3-year stretch from 2015 through 17, in which they won a staggering 19 of 21 major contests. The crown jewel came in 17 when Tech became the first and only school to go undefeated since the major schedule expanded to 7 events in 1981. Says Travis O'Quinn, a Tech alum who's now the coach and faculty sponsor of Kansas State's meet judging team. What they've done ranks right up there with the John Wooden UCLA Bruins. That level of dominance is seldom seen in any athletic competition. So, Stefan, I hadn't realized that I had stumbled upon this story at one of the kind of most remarkable moments, and maybe an inflection point in meet judging history, that A&M victory in 2022, earth-shattering news. I can't wait to see what 2023 holds. I imagine it's a lot of meat. Get your Scantrons ready.
When are the NCAA championships? I'm assuming this is an NCAA-sanctioned sport.
You would assume incorrectly, but it's the press releases from 2022 all came out in November. So I think they,
So you're saying it's a fall sport.
Starting to get a little nippy outside. It's meat judging weather.
And do students, do you have a sense of whether students go on to careers in meat judging, or is this really sort of an undergraduate sort of activity?
I'm slightly confused by the posture you're taking here. Do you perceive me to be an expert on meat judging?
I do, absolutely.
I have no follow-up questions are allowed. The extent of my knowledge I've just poured out to you into the world. I appreciate
it. And it was a lot, and we are grateful for it, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate the respect you're showing me, but I must demur. But I do wonder, is there anyone out here listening right now who has participated in intercollegiate meat judging? And if so, I demand that you email us instantly upon hearing this. I'm A, curious about your experience, and B, perhaps even more curious if we have meat judgers in our audience. So I look forward to the hang up at slate.com inbox this week to see what that holds. That is our show for today. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. To listen to past shows and subscribe or just reach out, go to slate.com/hangup. You can email us at hangup@slate.com, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. For Stefan Fatsis, I'm Josh Levine. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.